coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere.
Welcome, my friends and guests, to my show. I had the honor to interview numerous vets, to have them explain their life and what it was like to be in the military. Today's guest continues to bring more of these stories to you. Of all the medals upon the chest of soldiers of the United States Army from battles and wars we know, the one admired as the very best is the one of Infantry Blue. It's only a rifle upon a wreath. So why does it mean so much? It's what it took to earn it that gives it that touch. To earn this special accolade, you face the enemy fire whether you survived or not. God dialed that one. For those who served the cause and brought the nation glory, it's the Combat Infantryman's Badge. The Combat Infantryman's Badge, or CIB, is a U.S. Army badge award given to Special Forces and infantry soldiers who have fought in active ground combat since December 6, 1941. It has recognized the sacrifice of infantrymen who face the highest risk of being killed or wounded in action. A soldier wearing this badge has faced enemy fire. My guest today is Ed Kawczynski. He was born on the south side of Chicago and in the back of the yards. He attended Sacred Heart School and Delitzkow High School. On February 21st, 1968, he was drafted into the Army. His basic training was at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and he took infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. After training, he deployed to Vietnam in 1968 as an 11 Bravo infantryman in the 25th Infantry Division, the Tropical Lightning. He served in combat against North Vietnamese Regular Army forces and was wounded twice. After extensive surgery and recovery, he was discharged honorably on September 26, 1968. Thanks, Ed, for coming to my show.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the invitation.
You were drafted. What was your experience like in the induction center?
Well, the induction center was, they were polite. You weren't really truly inducted until later in the day. So the first several hours of that day, the 21st of February, it was along with maybe a couple hundred or a few dozen other men following the line, getting physicals. You got your physical from head to toe. They checked everything, your ears, your eyes, as I said, head to toe. You weren't in the service at that point yet, so they were polite. And I guess realizing it or looking back, it was pretty boring for them. They did the same thing, probably 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So we were just another number, Okay, move along, follow that line, next. So that's what that was like. As I said, later in the day, we all raised our right hand, we all took the oath, and then eventually we got on a bus, got to O'Hare Field, and I got my first plane ride to Missouri, another series of buses and rides to Fort Leonard Wood.
What was it like basic training at Fort Leonard Wood? Was it the good and the bad? What did you think about it?
Well, the good, for me, the good news was we were, when we were assigned to our training unit after that 0 week of testing and shots and getting your equipment and everything. Luckily for me, we were in the newer buildings. They had a 3-story brick building. For 1968, it was a modern building. We were in 8-man barracks, 8-man room, so we weren't in the long 40 or 50-man bunk beds. We had our own bed, our own locker. The tile floors, the bathrooms were nice, the showers were nice. You didn't have to sit in a commode side by side and ask the next guy, hey, pass me the paper. You had your own. So in that regard, it was convenient as far as that aspect of it. The training was rough. Unless you came into the military in physical shape, if you were one of those people that went to the gym a couple times a week and worked out or jogged, if you didn't do that, when you got to basic, it was challenging.
Remember running that mile in combat boots?
Absolutely. We ran everywhere. There was a little bit of marching. They taught us the close order drill, right face, left face, about face. You learned all that stuff. But we ran everywhere with boots.
You went to Fort Polk for infantry training and became 11 Bravo, which is the military operating job selection for infantrymen.
Yes.
Riflemen?
Exactly, you're right. When we got to Fort Polk, there was a big sign above the gate that said, "Welcome to welcome infantrymen bound for Vietnam." So when you got there, there was no question. That's where you're going. You didn't, you kept your fingers crossed. Well, maybe they'll make me a clerk or a cook or a truck driver, but when you went to Fort Polk, you knew where your next assignment was.
As they told us all when we got our MOS, our main MOS was 11 Bravo.
That's true, and I don't mean to disparage any other MOS. I mean, if you wound up in Vietnam, or if you didn't, you had a job to do. If you were drafted or joined, you did your job, whether it was a cook, clerk, truck driver, engineer, whatever the case may be. You did your duty, and I have respect for that.
Did you have any special training before you went to Vietnam?
I don't recall any special training. We all trained the same. We had mock battles where we would fight, against the invisible enemy. Training in Fort Polk, of course, is in Louisiana, hot, steamy. It was to get you acclimated to that kind of weather. That's what their intention was for that area. Special training, I wouldn't say anything special. We all had the same. We went through the evade and I can't think of the words. The training was pretty much typical.
Did they give you training on what would happen if you were captured?
No, you didn't. They didn't want that in your head.
Understood.
Of course, the idea was always there. I mean, they trained with the idea of fear. They wanted you. When you're a PFC or an enlisted man, the whole idea was to take orders. They didn't take a vote. They didn't have a meeting and should we do this or what do you think we should do? There was none of that. The training was to follow orders and do it when told.
You deployed to Vietnam. What was it like getting there? And when you first got there, what did you think of Vietnam?
Well, the back of your mind was always a little bit of fear. I mean, you went through the training and you knew you were going to be in a fighting position. So you really didn't know too much about it. When you got there, it was hot. When you stepped off that plane, of course it wasn't like you're at O'Hare. Walk off the plane and you're at air conditioning. You had to go down the steps. It was hot. It was all outdoors. Get off the plane. 200 troops get off because they're refueling to get the guys that are going home to get back on. So I guess the word would be trepidation. You're always fear of the unknown. You had some training, but you didn't know exactly what might happen from minute to minute.
Before you went to your first unit, did they give you any additional training?
We did. There was an acclimation period of a few days in country, again, to get you acclimated to the weather, etc. And then it was a matter of paperwork. Just waiting around for, I think it was three or 4 days maybe. It was for me, it was 57 years ago, so my memory's a little bit clouded on a lot of the things. I'll give you an example. I'm sure that while I was in country, no doubt in my mind, I had some hot meals. I can't remember a single hot meal that I had. All I remember are the sea rations.
You were then assigned to the 25th Infantry Division. Where did you go, and what was that base like?
Yeah, I was assigned to the 1st to the 5th Mechanized, which meant we had armored personnel carriers, APCs, or as we call them, Papa Charlie. It was unique because we didn't have any of that training in Fort Leonard Wood, anything about the tracks. It was all on-the-job training, so to speak. You know, the dichotomy of it was that every new guy thought that if I could just buddy up with a guy who's been there a while, I'll better my chances. And the guys who were there for a while, they wanted nothing to do with the new guys because they thought that they're going to mess up and possibly get them hurt or worse. So, but it was a good bunch of guys. You learn quick. You had to learn quick. We weren't with the tracks all the time. They were used for long-range patrols. We would get on the tracks that take us out a long distance. Oh, first of all, I should add the area we were in was in the center of the Michelin rubber plantations. Our base camp was called Dao Tiang.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the Saigon River, very close to Cambodia. So we fought against the NVA, hardcore fighters, and they came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and Cambodia and came into our area. We were about probably 20 miles or so northwest of Saigon, near Cambodia. So that was our area of operation, the Michelin rubber plantations.
So what were your duties when you got there?
Well, the typical infantry was called, everything had an acronym. They called them search and destroy. So search, S&D, search and destroy. Now, being on a armored personnel carrier, wherever we went, we didn't sneak up on anybody on those tracks. But I came to call it, for me it wasn't a search and destroy. I called them it a LFT, looking for trouble. We'd go out on patrols, try to look for trouble, try to engage. That was our whole mission for the day.
What was it like being on a patrol?
It was scary. We did come across occasionally from the villages. We came across some VC and they would just take the pot shots at us. If we were in the rubber plantations, the rubber plantations were huge, 50-foot trees, all in a row with foliage around them. So there was good cover all the way around. So an RPG team, rocket propelled grenade team of either NVA or VC, they could easily sneak up on us and fire and take a couple of us out pretty easily.
Now, the NVA was the Vietnam Regular Army, yep, and the VC was the Viet Cong, or their militia.
Right.
You received your first Purple Heart in action. How did this occur?
Well, my first one was I was in country about. I got to Nam the end of July, and my first injury was on the 19th of August. So, about 3 weeks before the first injury. On the 18th of August, another company. I was in Charlie Company. Another company. I think it was either Alpha or Bravo. I don't remember. They had a major battle on the 18th in this one area. Now the area was not rubber plantation, but adjacent to it, not designated as rubber, but jungle foliage, high tall grass, and jungle. And they got hit. This other company got hit on the 18th pretty heavy. It was a pretty heavy battle for them. So the next day on the 19th, our company was assigned to go and do kind of a cleanup, see what we could find any bodies or weapons or. So they were ready for us too. So we got hit. We got off our tracks. Our tracks took us so far. We got off and did a on-ground riff, and looking for trouble. And they found us. Trouble found us. We got ambushed. We got down, and we got you could hear the bullets. You wish sometimes that you didn't have buttons so you can get a little bit lower down. You could hear the bullets whizzing over your head as you're laying on the ground. And you're really in the middle of nowhere, and you can't fire back because all your other men are also spread out around you. So we're kind of not helpless, but in a dire situation. The firing stopped, the shooting stopped, and we were able to crawl out of there and get back on our tracks. And now our battalion commander was in his Loach, his 4-seater helicopter. And while we were in battle, so was another company a couple clicks away. And they were in more trouble than we were. So he radioed down that we were going to follow his lead. He was going to fly and kind of lead us through to meet up with them. So my track, I was on 2-3, 2nd Platoon, 3rd Squad. So my track I was on, we were going to take the point. And you typically followed single file, follow each other. So if somebody, mostly on the road, if the lead track hit a mine, well, then you knew not to drive there. So we were following his lead, and luckily our driver, John Lewis was his name, he was on the ball. Before we got into this hedgerow, he spotted some movement up ahead. So he threw it in reverse and got back out of there, and of course the other tracks behind us, they did the same. They swerved out of the way. But now we were kind of in almost a cowboys and Indians, circle the wagons. We were just kind of figuring out how to get out of the line of fire. And we were getting hit from all over. I was sitting on the back of the track. In the center of the track was a hatch that opened up for supplies and ammunition. So I was sitting kind of on the right side on that track, and my legs were across the opening of this hatch. Excuse me. So we were moving, dodging and weaving, and I was firing. At the time I had an M79 grenade launcher. That was my weapon, and a 45. So I was firing my 79 into the hedgerows, not really seeing anybody, but firing, knowing where the firing was coming from. So suddenly I went blank. Something hit me in the head, and it felt like a hammer. And evidently I was unconscious, and I fell into the track, into the hatch. Luckily I didn't fall off. I would have gotten run over. But as I fell into this hatch, and I was unconscious. So I don't know how long, but I'm guessing probably not long. I came to from probably being jostled around. I came to, and my head hurt, and I put my hand up and I touched and my helmet fell off, and I touched my head like this where it hurt the most, and my hair was like shaved. I had like a little crew cut right on the top of my head here. So I found my helmet, and I looked at my helmet, and I see a hole about the size of a quarter. And my first inclination was somebody behind me. But when I looked at it more carefully, the front of it, the diameter of the bullet going in was about the size of a pencil, and the exit was the size of a quarter. And when I looked inside, the webbing that sits on it, one of those webs was just cut. So that bullet went through my helmet, went out the back, and I've got a picture. Maybe you'll be able to show it later on. I've got days later. I live to tell the tale, so don't worry. Days later, I had a picture of myself, a Polaroid picture with a cleaning rod showing the path of that AK-47 round. So I came to. I put my helmet back on, and I continued the fight. Now the tracks found a spot where we were relatively safe, where they couldn't sneak up on us, but they still could fire at us. So I was firing my grenade launcher, and John, the guy Bo Smith, was in the turret in the TC. He had our 50 caliber machine gun was out for maintenance. So we mounted a 60 caliber machine gun in the turret. So he was on the 60. John Lewis was the driver was in the hatch, and he was firing his 45 out of the driver's hatch. So I was firing my 79, and now another squad member came into the track through the back door, and he was reloading his magazines, his M16 magazine. He was reloading, and I didn't know him, he didn't know me, but I'm firing off the right side, and he was a Hispanic guy, so he had a little bit of an accent. He goes, "Hey man, you're hit." And I didn't catch it at first. I just kept shooting. He said, "You're hit, you're hit." So he says, "You're back." So I felt around like this, and my hand was bloody. So now I took my shirt off, and this guy behind called driver. John said, "Hey, this guy's hit, this guy's hit." So John ducked down, he came back, and he had my shirt off, and he looks and he goes, "Oh man," he said, you're shot to hell. I see 4 holes. And I looked in front to see if the bullets came out. And of course your adrenaline is sky high.
Right.
I didn't feel it. And foolish me, I wasn't wearing a flak jacket. So what had happened is a round must have hit the track somewhere and splattered. And I got 4 pieces of shrapnel in my kidney area. So not bad enough to even really cause pain. I didn't even feel it. So John grabbed a big piece of gauze and he wrapped me around. He said, "Ski," he says, "just stay down. Load magazines, stay down." So that's what I was doing. Every once in a while I'd pop out and fire off a couple rounds. So just that was my first injury. But to continue the same tale, John went back to his spot in the driver's hatch. He got hit. He got a ricochet off the turret and hit him in the back of the neck right here. So he comes down and he's panicking. He goes, I'm hit like a," and he cursed, and he was going to run out the back door for a medic somewhere. I grabbed him, sat him down, and the blood was just pouring down both sides from his neck. And I grabbed the towel and I put a towel on there. I said, "Hold us on here." And he was, "Ski, don't let me," and he was worried about passing out, losing too much. "Don't let me pass out, don't let me pass out." I said, "You're not going to pass out, hold us on here." We held that on there, and probably within, I would guess, the battle probably only lasted maybe 20 minutes. My theory, my PFC theory is, the NVA were good fighters. They knew that they had 15 or 20 minutes to fight, and then they knew to get out of there because we were going to bring in our artillery or our gunships. So they knew they had a 15 or 20 minute fight worth, and then get to their next position. So again, to continue the story, my platoon leader, my sergeant, he was also hit in the arm. It might have been the same bullet that ricocheted, because he got a ricochet in his bicep. John got hit in the neck. The guy in Bo, who was in the turret, he had a round go through his helmet, but it didn't draw blood. It went right above his right ear. It went in the front and came out the back and spun his head around, but it never touched him. So that sniper, whoever he was a good shot. Close, but no cigar.
Yeah.
So within probably a half hour or so, they called our fighting had stopped. They called in a dust-off, a medic evacuation, dust-off we called them. Took me, took John, took our Sergeant Hayes, Roger Hayes, who has been, there were several wounded, obviously. Took us all into the camp. They took us in. I got stitches in my 4 spots. The one in my helmet didn't even draw blood. It was more of a burn than a flesh wound.
Mm.
A little long-winded, I know, but
When you when you were at the base, did you ever get attacked, and how did your troops respond?
well, as infantry, you knew the response was immediate. I'll back up a little bit to our first day when we took the convoy from Ku Chi to Dao Tiang. This is back at the end of backing up to the end of July. There were 3 of us that kind of came together. There was me, Gary Sheets, and Gary Dobbins. Now Gary Sheets was kind of built like me, tall. I'm 6'6". Gary's about 6'6", but he's a broad farm boy from southeast Ohio. So when we got there from on our convoy to Dao Tiang, they told us, leave your gear here, and we both had M79s and .45 pistols on our hip. So they told us, well, leave your gear here, go find Lieutenant Klein. you're assigned to 2nd Platoon, Lieutenant Klein. So we walked down the way, a few hundred feet. We walked side by side, came almost like marching up to a couple guys having a conversation. So like I say, I'm 6'6", and Gary's about 6'5", 6'6". We've got these pistols on our hips. So we walk up, and he says, "We're looking for Lieutenant Klein." And Lieutenant Klein, or this guy, looks up at us, and he goes, "I'm Klein." And I said, "PFC Kawczynski reporting for duty." Gary, "PFC Sheets reporting for duty." He goes, "Holy crap, I thought you guys were MPs." So he says, "Okay, Sheets, you go to 1st Platoon, you Ski, you're at Kawczynski, you're in the 2nd Platoon. Put your gear in this hooch here." So we went, grabbed our stuff, and got back to the hooch. And this is just about dusk. The sun setting, getting to be about sun going down. So now we're in the hooch, our barracks hooch, and we're maybe 200 or 300 yards off the perimeter of the base camp. So all of a sudden we hear pop, 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 pop. Somebody's probing right at our area. So your initial question was, how did the infantry respond? Everybody grabs their weapons and runs to the berm line to hold position.
Right.
Along with the bunkers that were there. A couple of tracks rolled out before long, firing their 50s. So Gary and I, we've got our 45s and we've got our M79s, and they gave us probably a half a dozen rounds, but on the convoy to Dao Tiang. So we're laying on the ground, next to our gear, and he looks at me. He says, "Ski," I says, "You think we should go out there?" And I said, "Gary, I think they've got it covered. But if a NVA comes through that door, I got him." So that was our first combat experience. So Gary and I didn't participate, but we were under fire. We knew it was covered by the infantry on the line.
Understood. I think you told me that one of your friends was ordered to become an RTO, and he had a bad feeling about it. What happened to him?
Well, yeah, that was the other Gary. Gary Dobbins is his name. He came on the same convoy. We bonded. The three of us bonded once we found out we're going to the same unit. So we were there, as I said, 3 weeks together. So whenever we were in the main base camp, we kind of hung around together. So I was hurt on the 19th of August, and I was bandaged and stitched up. So the medics told me, "It's okay, don't go out on you're relieved of field duty for several days because you've got open wounds. You can't you can't wear a pack. You can't carry ammo, and if you cross a stream or whatever, you don't want an infection." So he says, "You stay back in the base camp for a few days anyway." So that was on the 19th of August. So now on the next day, the 20th, I was in the hooch. I'd probably writing a letter for home or something. But I remember I had my helmet, and I got a pen, and I was writing on the helmet where the bullet went in. I was scribbling on there, "Ha ha, you missed me." And on the back where the bullet exited, I put "exit." So I was doing this, and who shows up but my buddy Gary Dobbins. He comes to see me because he knew I was hurt. He was in another platoon. So we sat down together and we're talking and just talking about the battle we had yesterday, because he was in it also, unscathed, fortunately. So we're talking about the training we had and how scary yesterday was, how so many men we didn't lose any men. Our company didn't lose any men, but a lot of wounded. So we talked about how scary it was, and gosh, we still got 11 and a half months to go. That was our conversation. So then all of a sudden, Gary kind of got quiet. And I said, "What's up, Gary?" And he says, "Ski, I'm scared." He said, "They want me to be RTO tomorrow." And I thought, 3 weeks? 3 weeks in the field, and they're going to give you the radio? That was a pretty heavy responsibility. And he wasn't scared to be an RTO. He was scared of messing up. He wasn't afraid of what might happen to him. He was afraid of just not being capable. So I can't remember the exact words, but I tried to be encouraging, try to give him some encouragement that he'll be okay. I said, look, you're going to be with the captain. You're going to be with the company commander. So where he goes, you're going to be. That's the best man to be with at that time. So I tried to give him this encouragement and that he could. I said, if they didn't think you could do the job, they wouldn't give it to you, Gary. You could do that job. So we talked for a little while longer, and I said, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be there when you roll out. So next morning, we met. The tracks were lined up. They're going to do another riff in the area, and I helped him. Get the Prick 25. The radio was probably about 25 pounds, along with the rest of the other stuff you have to carry. So I helped him. With the radio, get the radio on his back, and I gave him a shoved up on the command track, and I gave him thumbs up. I said, "Okay, Gary, see you when you get back. I'll see you later." They rolled out. That was the 21st of August. I never saw him again. We lost 17 men in the rubber plantation. They got ambushed. 17 men, Gary being one of them, never came back. We have not just combat, but I think every veteran who serves in a war zone, there are days you remember. And I don't, I'm sorry, I don't call them anniversaries. I call them days of remembrance. 21st of August is the date of remembrance.
Understood. What does a RTO do?
RTO stands for radio telephone operator. Basically, he's the communication. He carries. There's two. Each company will have usually two. They'll have a battalion RTO and a company RTO. So one will monitor what's going on with the battalion to give that information to the company commander, and then the other will have a company RTO will monitor what's going on between the other platoons, because each platoon will have a radio also. Platoon leader is lieutenant. He'll have an RTO, and the company commander will have two RTOs. So for communications between company, between platoons, and between the battalion, who might be talking to the battalion commander up in his helicopter.
Right. You became an RTO. What does that lead to in the field?
Well, we're moving up now to beginning of November. At the end of October, our company commander, along with an RTO and maybe even a driver, my memory's a little bit fuzzy on that, got hurt. They rolled over a landmine. So we got a new company commander, new driver, new RTO. So one day we were in a night position, logger position, and my platoon lieutenant, 2-6, he says, go see the old man. Company commander wants to talk to you. And the first thing I thought of is, oh no, bad news from home. I'm thinking something happened. Why does he want to talk to me? I didn't do anything wrong. This was, as I said, it was November. So I went to the command track, and I told him who I introduced myself, reporting for duty. He said, Ski, he says, I need an RTO, and 2-6 tells me you're the man for the job. 2-6 being my lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, I don't want to be the RTO. So I said, well, sir, I says, I try to talk my way. I says, well, my squad's kind of shorthanded, and I'm not sure I'd be good for the job, and I'm hemming and hawing. He says, well, look, I need somebody, at least try it out for a few days. If you don't like it, okay, I'll find somebody else. But he says, but if you're my RTO, he says, I was a PFC. He says, I'll put you in for a promotion, and before long, if you stay with me, I'll put you in for another. You'll be a E5 before you know it. He says, but give it a try. So PFCs don't argue with the company commander. So
nope, that's smart.
yeah. So that was that. Now, fortunately, I guess, at that time, we were providing security. Our operation was providing security for roam plows in the area. So alongside of the rubber plantations were a lot of vegetation, those jungle areas where the NVA were hiding. So our job was to be security for the roam plows. Roam plow was a big, huge tractor with this, 2 or 3 ton plow specialized to knock down vegetation. It could knock down trees, knock down not like a rubber tree, but the vegetation style. So we would go to an area, and they would start a perimeter and just make the circle bigger and bigger. Several plows knocking down this vegetation as they went, and of course we would provide security to make sure nobody snuck up on these drivers, these plows, and take them out. So that was our job for a couple weeks in beginning of November. So an interesting story about being on that security. The plows found a bunker complex in the jungle that you couldn't see until you were right up on it. Real heavy vegetation, but they found it because they're knocking down the vegetation. So we dismounted and we decided to investigate this bunker complex. And they had fighting positions, and they were there for quite a while because they had well-dug bunkers. They had fighting positions. The one bunker I came up to, it must have been an officer, because they had like a plastic covered by leaves over the bunker complex. The bunker was dug into the earth, and right outside the entrance to this bunker, they had, out of bamboo, they had made almost like a picnic table. It was probably 5 feet long and maybe 3 feet wide, and a little bench, and it's all bamboo, all handmade, just outside this bunker. And as we went through there, I looked in the bunker and I could see that steps were carved out of the dirt, but it was dark in there. I didn't want to go in. So I investigated a little bit further, and there was a guy following me around. I think he was a Spec 4. Didn't really know him that well. We just knew each other for a couple of weeks. But he was, "Ski, you going down in there?" I said, "No, I'm not going down in there." So I went around, found some other little place where they cooked their meals and where they had a fighting position and this and that, and I kind of circled around back, and he was following me for a while, and then he went off, and so I came back to this bunker because to me it looked important. So I decided to go in. I knew I had to be careful about it. So I slowly found my way inside down these dirt steps. It was about 4 or 5 steps. It was pretty deep, but it was dark in there. So once I got in, and I stood still for a while till my eyes acclimated to the darkness, and I was amazed. There was a bed in there, a wooden bed, like they might have had in one of the villages nearby, and on the bed was a mat, a straw mat for comfort, I guess. And so I'm looking, and right on the middle of the bed was a holster with a pistol in it, just sitting on this bed. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is booby trap. That's the first thing you think of course. So I left that alone. I looked around. I see there's a bicycle in there. There's a bicycle leaning against the wall. I look under the bed, and there's some suitcases. So as I'm kind of investigating, nothing was booby trapped. They left in a hurry. They had just evacuated and got out of there in a hurry because they knew we were coming from the plow's track. So I decided to check out this pistol. So I gingerly looked it over real carefully. Didn't see any kind of wires or nothing that looked. So I lifted it up. So I thought, a souvenir. So I put it under my belt. Now, unbeknownst to me, this other guy is up he's watching me from the head of the doorway to the hooch. He says, "Ski, would you find something?" "No," I lied. So he says, "Well, you can't keep any. We're not allowed to keep anything. You got to turn it in. You can't keep." I said, "There's nothing to show because I didn't find anything." I lied again. So he disappeared. So I'm looking around. That's when I found the suitcase had civilian clothes in it. The bicycle was there. I found a cache of RPGs and other ammunition. So who shows up but the company commander? this guy went and told the company, Ski found something. So the company commander, he's at the top of the stairs. He says, Ski, did you find something? So now again, PFCs don't lie to the company commander. I says, yeah, pass it up here. So I passed it up. He's, let me see that. So I passed it. He's, keep looking. So I'm looking around. So it took him about a minute or two to inspect it. He says, well, you know, the firing pin is gone out of this pistol, and the guy whoever owned it tried to whittle a piece of wood to use as a firing pin. Foolish, but so be it. He said, you want it? He asked me. I said, yeah, I'd like to keep it if I could. He's, okay, you can keep it, but the next one you find is mine. I said, okay. So I'm thinking to myself, you know, I've got to. So
R.H.I.P.
Yeah, I've got myself a souvenir. Eventually, I passed that ammunition and up to the, and I took I carried around a little Kodak box camera. I took, everybody had one. So I handed it up to somebody. They took my picture sitting at the picnic table, and they took my picture coming out of the bunker with the ammunition. So unfortunately, I was hurt not long after that, and all that stuff got left behind. My helmet got left behind, my souvenir pistol got left behind, and my camera got left behind.
Please tell us about your second wound and how it occurred.
That was probably maybe a week or two later after this bunker complex. We were in a night logger position, not in our base camp, but excuse me. And the company commander says to me, I'm still RTO, of course. So he says to us, me and the other RTO, he says, oh, well, the battalion commander told me to send out a platoon of guys into the rubber to do a recon, and we're going with them. And I thought to myself, and this was not far from where, in August, where that company got ambushed and we lost 17 men.
Right.
So I didn't like this idea at all, but, you know, okay. So getting ready to go. So then the battalion RTO tells the captain, he says, the old man wants to talk to you. So I went over to the side and I clicked over to battalion radio frequency on my radio, and I'm listening in, and he's bawling them out. He says, I told you to send the platoon. I didn't tell you to go with them. I don't want you in that. I don't want you in the rubber. So I clicked back, but I'm saying to myself, good, we're not going. You know, we're gonna maybe ride today. So he just makes a decision. He says, okay, we're not going with the platoon into the rubber, but we're gonna take a couple of mortar tracks with us, and we're gonna set up nearby in case they need mortar help. We're gonna be there. So I said, okay, well, at least we're riding today. So we're on the command track. We've got a couple of mortar tracks, and then the angel track bringing up the rear. Angel track meaning the medic track. We're bringing up the rear. So we're going along the rubber plantation. The rubber's on our right side. We're going down this. It really wasn't a road. It was just a path made by tracks and plows. And not far was the Rome plow. The engineers, mechanics would always set up an area that they know was safe, that if something went wrong, maintenance, they could drag something over there for repair, not have to drag it all the way back. They could do some repair in the field. So we're going down this dirt path, not even a road. And I got hinky about it. I just had a bad feeling to me. So we're making pretty good time because it's a clearing. So I'm sitting on a case of ammunition next to the TC, right behind the driver. I'm sitting, and then the captain's sitting on a Jeep seat behind me. So I'm sitting on this case of ammo, and I hit the driver on the shoulder, and I say, "Man, get off this road. Get in the rubber. Don't ride on this road." So and we're all single file, of course. So he veers off, and he's into the rubber, and now we're going over dead logs and in between. So we're going too slow for the captain. So he says, "Driver, get back on that path." So we get back on the path, and I don't like it. So we come to a clearing right where the engineers had cleared this area for maintenance. So the driver kind of slows down. He looks over his shoulder, and I'm thinking, "Oh no, don't stop. We don't want to stop here." So the captain says, "A little further. Keep going, keep going." So we went maybe 100, 200 feet, and boom, huge explosion. I mean, heat and dirt, and your ears are ringing, and dirt in you're bouncing along, and you just, you know, you don't at first you don't know what happened. So we come to a stop, and I grab my weapon, I jump down, and the driver had already gotten down. So he got off to the side, he's laying down, because when it first happened, you don't know, is it an RPG? Are you going to be fired on now? Is it an ambush? Whatever, and it didn't take long to figure out. You look at the track, and the track's blown off on our side, on the left side. So, and there's no firing, but still you're pumped with adrenaline. And so I looked at the driver. I said, "Are you okay?" And he was just wide-eyed, and he was like almost in shock. So like I said, your ears are ringing, but somebody's screaming. So I look up back up on the top of the track, and the captain had been blown sideways. He was unconscious. He fell to his right on top of the track, and he's just unconscious. And the other RTO, he kind of panicked a little bit. He's with him, and he's shaking him. Get up, get up, get up. So I jumped up there, and I pushed the other soldier away, and I'm looking at the captain, and I didn't see blood, I didn't see hurt. He was just knocked from concussion. So now he's starting to come to. He's starting to, come awake again. So he looked fine. So I jumped back down, and we weren't under fire, but something would happen here. So something to me, again, your adrenaline is sky high, and something was wrong. And I'm looking for rips in my uniform, whatever, and something didn't feel right between my legs. So I stuck my hand down my pants, and my crotch felt swollen. And I pulled and there was blood on my fingertips. I thought, oh my. Now by now, the medic truck, one of the medics that was in the Angel truck, he comes running. Who's hurt? Anybody hurt? Anybody hurt? I said, yeah, I caught some shrapnel. Lay down. So I got on the ground, and I pulled down my trousers, and he's looking. He goes, yeah, I see blood. He says, but it doesn't look too bad, but you're bleeding between your legs. So he gives me some gauze to hold on the wound, and so now there's some radio conversation between us and the battalion commander who's flying around in his loach. So they say, well, call for a dust-off. We got to get him out, get Ski out of here, medevac him out of here. So the battalion commander calls down to the RTO, and he says, is he ambulance? Does he need to be on a stretcher, or can he sit? So they asked me, Ski, do you think you could sit, or you need a stretcher? I says, I think I can sit. So he comes down for me. The battalion commander came down in his 4-seater loach. Somebody popped smoke, he came down. So I climbed in, and as I said, everything got left behind. My buddies, the captain, my friends, they're all giving me thumbs up as we're taking off to get to the base camp. So that was the last I saw of any of these guys again. So we get to the base camp, and they bring out a stretcher to get me on a stretcher, and they wheel me into probably the examining room. They don't tell you to undress. They just take scissors and they cut everything off. They throw a sheet on you. So first thing the medic says, he says to me, he says, have you urinated since this happened? I said, no, it happened like 10 minutes ago. So he gives me one of those metal urinals. He says, here, try. So I tried to urinate, and nothing's happening. So he says, well, we're going to try a catheter. So he tried to take a catheter and insert a catheter into me, and it goes halfway in, and he pulls it out, and there's blood on the end of it. So he says, well, that's something we're not going to do here. They make a decision to put me back on the helicopter and take me to a major hospital, not just a medic station. So I get to they put me back on the hospital. Now I don't really know whether they flew me to Kawczynski or Long Binh. I think Kawczynski probably. That was our main base camp. So now they get me into the operating room, and of course you're cold. It's cold inside there, and I got a sheet on, and now you're starting to see nurses. You haven't seen American women in months and months, of course, but they're masked up. But you could tell by their voices and their eyes that. So this one kind of tussles my hair a little bit. Says, "Hey, soldier, you need a haircut. So I kind of joke, I'm trying to be glib. I said, well, that's what I came in here for. So of course you're like this with your arms spread, IV here, IV there, shot, whatever. And I was talking to somebody on this side, and the one on this side says, well, goodbye. And I went to turn, excuse me, and I didn't see her, I was out. They gave me the sedative and I'm out. So the next thing I remember is waking up in the recovery. So the nurse in recovery, I know I'm talking a long time and I don't want to take too much time, but I'll make this short. I'm in recovery and the nurse is waking you up and they, Edward, Ed, PF, wake up, stay awake. So it's okay, I'm awake, and you're still groggy. And she says, did you know you're allergic to penicillin? I said, no, I didn't know that. She says, well, you better remember. Okay, I'll remember. So now, a couple hours or an hour later, the doctors come around. His first question, did you know you're allergic to penicillin? I said, I had no idea. He says, well, you better remember. He says, you almost died on the operating table. I went into anaphylactic shock from that. So again, to make a long story short about that, I was there for a couple days. I had stitches. I had catheter bags. I had drainages. The shrapnel somehow that was underneath the track blew out, made a right turn, made a left turn, and got me between the legs, and that piece of shrapnel cut my urethra tube, which is the tube that carries urine out. So they flew me back to, eventually they flew me to Camp Zama, Japan, where I recovered for about a month. So from the 15th of November, when I was hurt, to just before Christmas, they flew me to the States, and I was in Camp Air Force Hospital, Chanute, Rantoul, Illinois. So I got there, and of course I had a doctor, a specialist, a urologist, and it took 2 more operations, a total of 3, 1 in Nam, and 2 more operations to rebuild the urethra to where I could, I wouldn't be catheterized the rest of my life. But he reconstructed that urethra tube for me. So I spent 10 months in the hospital. So I was from November till September of '69. I spent in the hospital.
Well, that's quite a story, Ed. My last question I ask every veteran on my show, and you especially as a combat veteran, how do you feel about being a vet?
Well, I'm proud of it. I was drafted. I didn't go by choice. I know a lot of guys went by choice. And I have contact with a lot of other combat veterans because I go to the vet center in Orland Park, Illinois. And for the most part, we're all proud of our service. Our country called. It wasn't a popular war. Our country called, and we answered the call, and we did what was asked of us.
Well, thank you for being on my show.
Thank you, Jim.
I'd like you to accept this coin and this pin.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, when you thank us for our service, there are so many stories that you'll never hear out there about the men and women who've served to defend you. So basically, stories like this, they tell you about the men and women who answered the call. Normally, I'd read a letter from a unit I received and supported during my sending care packages. But I'd like to read a presidential unit citation awarded to Ed that served in Vietnam instead. Under the command of, and at that time, Colonel Major General Andrew Anderson, deceased, the 5th Infantry Mechanized, received in the 2nd Presidential Unit Citation. It would later win a Valorous Unit Award for Action Battle of Cu Chi. The 5th fought for 3 hard years in Vietnam, again establishing its reputation for tough fighting, perseverance, in harsh condition, and excellence in the face of our enemy opposition. What follows is the official Presidential Unit Citation awarded by President Nixon and certified by the Secretary of Defense on November 28, 1969. By virtue of the authority vested in me as President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, I have today awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, Army, which is a red badge worn on the right side, for exemplary heroism, 1st Battalion Mechanized 5th Infantry, 25 Infantry Division, and the following attached units: 1st Platoon, Troop A, 3rd Squadron, 38th Infantry Platoon, 3D Platoon, Company A of the 65th Engineer Battalion, 1st Platoon, Battery B, 5th Platoon, 2nd AD, 5th Section, Battery D, 7th Artillery, 44th Infantry Platoon, Battery A, 7th Battalion, 11th Artillery. Official citation: the 1st Battalion Mechanized 5th Infantry, 25 Infantry Division, and its attached unit distinguished itself by extraordinary heroism in the combat operations against numerical superior enemy forces in the Republic of Vietnam from 18 August to 20 September 1968. During this period, the 1st Battalion Task Force, through reconnaissance and force, ambush, counter-ambush, and reaction missions, were effectively destroyed a regimental-sized enemy force, preventing the enemy from seizing initiative in its third offensive. The officer and men of the task force displayed an outstanding bravery, high morale, and example of esprit de corps in fierce hand-to-hand combat, counteroffensive action against well-disciplined, heavy-armed, and entrenched enemy forces. An example of the astounding bravery and aggressiveness occurred 21 August during a reconnaissance and force mission. The lead elements, Company C, 1st Battalion, came under heavy mortar, rocket-propelled, and machine gun and automatic fire. The company deployed against the enemy force, while the scout platoon protected the company flank and prevented reinforcements by a battalion-sized enemy unit. Through skillful use of close support fire from artillery, helicopter, gunship, and tactical air, the officer and men of the task force repulsed human waves attacks and defeated numerical superior enemy forces, which left 182 dead on the battlefield. The individual act of gallantry, the teamwork, and the aggressiveness of the officers and men in the battalion task force continue throughout the period of prolonged combat operations, resulting in a resounding defeat of enemy forces in the operational area. The heroic effort, extraordinary bravery, and professional competence displayed by the men and women of the 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry, and attached units are in the highest tradition of the military service and reflect great credit upon themselves, their unit, and the armed forces of the United States. Signed, Richard Nixon. Several weeks ago, many of you watched the parade of the United States Army on its 250th birthday. Those soldiers that marched and paraded were all volunteers. They, like all of us who served in that branch of service, were proud. The parade was, I believe, for all of us who served in Korea, Vietnam, and all the wars sent. In spirit, we were marching with them. We have also had the honor and privilege of honoring our country, who is 1 year younger than all the military branches on July 4th. For all of you out there who served, your country called you and you answered the call. I'm proud to be a member of such a select and honorable group of men and women. Thank you for watching my show here on PHTV4. I look forward to presenting another interesting show next month. Honor and respect.